here. This time we have a very special guest who came to us from Israel. Hi Noam, welcome in Prague. This event couldn't happen without our sponsors, which I mentioned, which is Session Mastercard company and also PragueJS. We're gonna have in the middle as next on us. And if you feedback very well, if you have any topic for next meetups, you can give us stars on our meetup page. I wanted to mention that this time we finally have recording set up, so the session is going to be recorded and then we will just publish on our YouTube channel, so there you can check it out. And I think that's it for the introduction. No,
thank you.
The stage is yours.
Thank you. So, having me. Today I'm going to talk about full stack code without. And before I'll start with my presentation and demo, I want to make sure that I know what you guys are using. So, I'm guessing all of you are using JavaScript in the front end. How many of you used it? Perfect. Okay. What is your favorite front end? React? Okay. Angular? Okay. Vue? Okay. Svelte? Okay. Quick? Anyone? Okay. No. Making sure. How many of you like both sides of the equation? Okay. To do. Wow. Okay. What do you use on? How many use Node.js on the back end? Okay. Cool. So I'm going to talk about that mostly today. So just a little bit about where I come from, what I do. As you've said earlier, 7 years ago, I've started a company called Firefly Migration that focuses on large enterprise applications, huge with hundreds of tables and thousands of forms, CRMs, ERPs, insurance, those kind of applications. I've gained a lot of experience in that side, and that kind of motivate our talk today. And that's my day job, so that's also fun. In the last few years, I've done a lot of TypeScript, Node.js, all of those. I'll talk about those. How many of you use screen? Only you? Only they use more than one screen. Everyone else has just one screen? Yes. Wow, okay. Get another screen. So this is the screen. I'm using a 55-inch 4K desktop. I strongly recommend it. I used to have many screens. I had 8 screens at some point. And eventually I got tired of the line separators between them. So I just took a big one, and that's fun. I strongly recommend it. That's my lovely family, and that's the logo of my hometown. So as I said, I've been working a lot on huge application, and you could see front-end code and back-end code, front-end code and back-end code. And your application logic and application rules gets duplicated all over the code. When Node.js came out, I was super happy because finally I can use the same language on the front end and the back end. But as time went by, I saw that not enough do that. Okay, and they have different mindset as front-end and back-end developers, different tools, different even styles of language like type. I saw boilerplate code repeated again and again and again. Imagine all of those routes: put, post, delete, get, duplicated hundreds of times with vulnerabilities. Someone needs to audit all of them. I really hate boilerplate code. The way I look at it, when we have a data entity like product in this entity, that's what we actually need. But around write a lot of code again and again. I have statements or some kind of other M's that read the data. We'll have many routes. We'll get the data and update the data, and have front-end code that will take the JSON server and rebuild it into that we can use in the front end. So all code is just code that we need to write again and again and again. And I think it should all be derived from the entity, okay, from the data entities that we look. So I have code sharing between the front and backend. Type sharing is nice. It's a good start. TRPC have done some cool things around that. But it should be so much more. We should share authorization, pretty much anything, okay? You know all these applications where you have front-end validation that does something, but the API doesn't maintain that, or the other way around. It just doesn't make sense to write the same thing again and again. I don't like vendor locking. You know, there's tools like Firebase, for example, where you get backend as a service. If you start an app with Firebase, you're stuck. You're always going to use Firebase as the backend. Don't want to have vendor locking. I want to have the flexibility to move around. I don't like code generations because someone needs to maintain the code that is generated. Okay, and that someone is usually me, and I don't like doing that. I don't like boilerplate code for pretty much the same reason, and I don't like config files because I like code. I want refactoring, I want cross-reference, I want to be able to redesign things, and YAML files or JSON files of configurations or GraphQL schemas, whatever, they don't allow that for me, or not easily enough. So with these ideas in mind, I started writing apps several years ago, and I wrote a small app for a food bank next to my house, where they deliver food like every holiday to people in need. Okay, I'm sure you probably have that. Volunteers come in, get some parcels, and go and deliver them. And my wife sent me to deliver parcels. I get lost. So I said, okay, some do that better. And I wrote a small app to do that. And we started small, 50 parcels, 100 parcels, 200 parcels. By the end of 2019, we were distributing 17,000 parcels with about 10 NGOs in Israel. And then COVID came. And I don't know how COVID was for you here, but in Israel, there were strict lockdowns. People weren't allowed to go buy groceries, people over the age of 65. So the army took it upon itself to deliver food to their houses, and I had an app to do that. So it was, and the app scaled from 17,000 deliveries a year to 17,000 deliveries a day. And it really stretched these ideas of being able to reuse the same code in the front end and the back end. And I think that's where they actually shone, because I was able to very, very quickly, COVID came one day. It was crazy. We saw it coming, but no one imagined how it's going to look. And we were able to scale that big and make the necessary changes, and pretty much me. I didn't have a team. It was just the volunteer work that I was doing. And we ended up delivering, or currently we are delivering 450,000 parcels a year on a Heroku server that costs $7 for the server and $9 for the database. Okay, so we can go very cheap. And we got the Presidential Volunteer Award for that, and we're very proud of that. So we said, okay, this actually is a thing. Let's start writing documentation and putting it out there. So as you can see, up until here, we didn't really care about stars. But then we published it on Hacker News, and it just shot up. And of course, I will ask you for stars multiple times today. Hopefully, you will oblige. So the fun thing about remult is that it plays nice with other. You can use it on any front end, React, Angular, Vue, whatever you like, any backend, any database, and you can deploy it to any cloud provider. Okay, and you don't have to start from scratch with it. You can have a normal application and add it, or start if you want it. All of those are available and simple. So that's pretty much most of the slides that you'll see today. From now, I'm going to go into live coding. And what I'm going to do today is take a front-end React app and turn it into full stack, including server-side paging, sorting, filtering, CRUD capabilities, validations, logic, Postgres database, authentication, authorization, and if we'll have enough time, hopefully deployment. Does that sound reasonable for 20, 25 minutes? Sure. Okay. So if we quote a smart, let's go to the code. Here we have a normal React app that uses Vite. How many of you use Vite, by the way? Wow, none of you use Vite? Okay, okay. Vite, use Vite. How many of you use CRA or create React app? Okay, how do you write React without CRA or Vite? What do you do? CRA. You're using CRA? Okay, so you're using CRA. Okay, so Vite is CRA that works. It takes CRA, but it runs a lot faster and it's a lot cleaner. It's like, Avenue is smart. I strongly recommend it. Use Vite. My first demos was with CRA. I switched to Vite. Everything is better. So we're using Vite here to do what CRA normally does. And we have a to-do app. The to-do app has a task, okay, a task entity. It has an ID. It has a title. It has a completed yes or no. That's the basic data model of my app. And let's go and review our React app. is a state of tasks. And these are the tasks that you see over here. Okay. And we have add task functionality. What happens when I do a new task and it gets added. And we have completed, that is serving these two functions. And we have some HTML for the form, and we have a map for the tasks. We set completed and set title, delete eventually, and again, some basic HTML around it. Reasonable React app, right? Not well refactored, I know, it's here for the demo, so you probably break it into more components if you were a more responsible guy than me. So what I want to do is I want to take this front-end app and make it into a full-stack app. So the first thing I need a backend. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to source, and I'll create a backend folder, and add an index file into it, and then say const app equals express. Sorry. Cool. So just like a normal Express app. Now, I love it that just like CRA does hot reload for the front end, and Vite does hot reload for the front end, whenever I make a change, it reloads. I want to have the same functionality for my backend. So I'm going to ask Vite to run the backend for me when I develop. Okay, so to do that, I'm going to go to Vite config. I'm going to say import express from this plugin, and then I'll ask it to please run my backend. Source backend. And yeah, I'll need also to export my. Cool. Let's see that it works. Console log, haha. Yeah, haha. And yay. Just like working, but not. Let's take a look again. What did I miss? Haha, okay, great. So we've got our aha working over here. So we got hot reload for the backend, that's just some wiring. And we can continue. And the next thing I'm going to do, a normal Express app should do app listen. I'm going to restrict it to only do that when I'm running in production. So I'm going to say if not process env Vite, then app listen to 3002. Okay? Normal React app, so far so good? Okay, I've been told not to say so far so good so much, so let's see if it works for me. And the next thing I want to do is install it on the backend. So I'm going to import remult by saying import remult express. And going to get it here. And I'm going to say app use remult express. Cool. So that's it. That's setting up remult. Remult is a middleware within in this context. Of course, it works with many servers if I need to. So back to what we were showing. In our app, we have this task, and I think it should be shared between the front end and the back end. I want to have two devices. So I'm going to create a folder called share, and I'll drag and drop the task from the front end. Great. Now, that it's here, I really want to use this as the focal point of everything that is related to task. I want to have the database be derived from it. I want to have the APIs derived. I want to have the front-end query language be derived from it. Everything is reflection of this data. Give it a decorator entity, and I'm going to give it a key of task, and I will ask it to support all CRUD functionalities. Okay? So when I say allow API, I'm basically telling it anything. Later we'll restrict that. That's a good place to start. Next, I'm going to tell each field what is its. So in this case, I want to use auto increment, and a title is a string, and a boolean, a completed is the boolean. And lastly, to my index and register it. Okay. So as soon as I do that, we can see here the route. I'm going to go and open a new request. And I'm going to go get, and I'll get my empty task array. Let's add a post with a body, with a title submitted to the database, and if I run get again, I will get it from the database. Okay? Now, we haven't set up a database, so by default, just for development, we use a very simple JSON database that makes it very easy to follow on things, so we can see here the data. Okay? Later, of course, we'll upgrade to a real database like Postgres. How many of you use Postgres? Okay, cool. What does everybody else do? Mongo, okay. What else, by the way? So Postgres, Mongo, what do you use? Both, okay, cool. How many of you heard of Oracle or SQL Server? Okay, good. The Angular guy also knows Oracle. Okay. So anyhow, so I'm going to go and I'm going to hijack the task from the front end. I'll copy those and delete them. So now this doesn't have in it. And I'm going to use the request over there to post it. I'll just do that. And I'll use the post that we've just used to post all of them. So now I have tasks in my database. And we can also look here and see that the database was updated. And we can also check it here just to have fun. I can say /API/tasks, and we can see the tasks. Okay? So by defining the class entity and registering it with remult, I was able to expose this API and define the database. Now it's time to handle the front end. So I'm going to go to our app.tsx, and I'm going to define const task repo, remult repo of task. Now when I do that, remult returns to me a repository of type task. And that repository is something I'm going to use to interact with my task, to read tasks, to update tasks, to delete tasks. So I'm going to say here, use effect, task repo, find, then set tasks. Okay. Now I'm going to save it, data in my front end. Okay. Notice how I'm using the task type that I used on the server to define API and everything. I'm also using it here in the front end in my repository of type task. And by calling the all the tasks, and I display in my front end. Now, there's no black behind the scenes. These are just pure REST API calls, as you can see, that go and get the data. Okay, so you get standard APIs, consume from anything else if you want, but very simply you can consume it from your React app. Now, we studied many applications, and we started to see patterns that come across. There are many things that you request from an API that you need it for most of your entities, like, for example, paging. So we kind of built them built in. So I can say limit 3, so I'll get only the first 3 items. I can say page 2, and I'll get the second page. And you can see here that these are standard REST API calls with URL parameters. Okay? So I can get server-side paging, just like that. I can get server-side sorting, completed ascending. So now the completed is at the bottom, or completed descending. So now the completed, and oh, yeah, don't do that. Why did you do that? I spent an hour setting this up. Bear with me. Let's see how my fine motor skills work. So I can replace order by with where, side filtering, true, or completed false. Okay? And also get type checking, like if I here I get a type with TypeScript. Okay, so it makes sure that I don't do kind of mistake sometimes we get to do. And if I find it will just show the data. Okay? So again, by defining entity, once over registering it on the endpoint, I got the full paging, server-side paging, sorting, filtering, API, all of those working. Let's do CRUD. And the first thing I want to do is be able to add the task. So I go to the add task method and say here, await task repo, insert. So now one more task. And we can see that it was added. And we can see that it made a standard post call to the back. Okay? Of course, it's typed, so if I do an error, it will tell me that I've done it wrong. And we can do also the same for the tasks. So if I'll delete, it will make an API delete and delete it from our data. And we can also set, check a box, we want it to immediately set it. So we're going to say await task repo save. If I check request being sent to the backend, okay, and if you're using our nice DB over there, it's quite reactive, so I like it to see it like that. Cool. And the last thing I'm going to do, I want to be able to add a save for the text that we do a const save task, and I'm going to do a try and a catch. And remember that I'm doing a try the alert myself. Everybody always asks later, why am I using alert? So I'm just writing it. I'm catching the exception and this error message with an alert. Real program something better, but demo. And I will say here that I want to set the task with await task save of the task. Okay, and I will call it in the on. If I edit something and leave the row, it will get added, as we can see in our nice little JSON file that I for some reason closed. So let's open it again. We can see that it's, and if I'll fix it again. Okay. So check my list, we've done CRUD. And all of those are just finding a task, exposing it to the API, and using it. Now, everything that you've seen so far exists forever, is used in production. I'm going to show you is also used in production, but was released this Sunday, just before this set of meetups that I'm doing. So it's new, bear with me. I hope it will function as I want it. And in this case, like he loves my application so much, so another user. So that other user, the task list, and started checking tasks. And the first user, okay, the user has to do the hard work of refreshing. Okay, and we take it for granted. I'm sure that this is a good user experience, but users say, but we updated the task. Why don't I see the change? And then they give you a sentence like, but Google Docs support multiple. Start sweating because it's very, very complex. And I think that the thing about remult is we didn't create some kind of strange protocol or solve some theoretical. We just made it accessible, easier. So let's, okay. I'm going to code in my use effect, which here, I'm going to, over here, I'm going to find with query, argument, paging, sort, everything gets the same. And instead of that, I'm going to say subscribe, which I will just set the task with info.apply changes. What that actually does is whenever I get an update backend, it will apply the changes to task state. I'll return it over here, so it will unsubscribe when the task unmounts. And let's see what happens now. So I'm saving everything, and I've changed some tasks, and the second user sees that. And let's do it like this. And I'm going to set them. I think it's cool. Great. I just need to fix a small bug, because sometimes if I add a new task, the guy who added it will get it twice. It doesn't always happen, but sometimes it happens. And that's because whenever I make an update to the backend updates all the consumers of the query rows that was added. Now, since I also in the next line over here with the array, then it may be twice. So this away. And this. And also in the delete task, I don't delete it anymore. I need to remove it from the array because, again, the server, the stream mechanism will get a message to delete it and remove it from the task state. So I can add, and I can delete. Cool. So we've done live query. And the next concern that exists in all applications is validation. Okay? And that's particularly painful because in many we have our validation on the front end, and we need to pretty much enforce the same rules, at least on the API. And we never get that right, you know, and it's amazing how many times we can get those misaligned because it requires communication between different teams and different technologies and different people who do that. And I think it's just wrong. So let's take this to the use case. My use clicking add with as if there's no tomorrow, so there's a lot of empty tasks, and I click them to stop doing that and to enforce that. So just like anything else, I want to do this in my source of truth, in my task. So I'll go over here and say validate, validators required. And as soon as I do that, the user will be allowed to add an empty task. Okay, now watch the network tab. We can see that there's no network call. This is a front-end validation working on the front end. Okay, and let's try and bypass that through the API. So I'm going to go to our request, and I'm going to say title empty, send, and I get the same validation error on the backend. The same validation code was running both in the front end and the backend, and actually the object that I get back is structured in a way that I can reuse it when I build my form. It gives me for every field the validation error for the field, so it's very easy to implement it that I'll put it next to the input and give my user meaningful feedback. Okay, now it doesn't have to be built-in validations. You can write any validations that you like. You know, I can change this to a simple arrow function and say task, if task title length is less than 3, throw arrow too short. That front end, the same arrow function runs in the front end and runs in the back end. Okay? So I get to keep my single source of truth. Everything that is related to task is here in front of me in the task class. So we've done validation. Now my user has another request. They feel that asking them to go task by task and setting it is too much. They want to be able to set it all at once. Actually, let's delete those, the empty ones. Yay. So setting them all, they want to be able to set them all. Okay? So the way the user describes is said, I want you to write a button that will iterate over all the tasks and will set them to completed based on the buttons that I click. So let's go and do that. I'm going to go to our app.ts6 and to our set all method. Of await task repo, fine. I'm getting the task from the server because maybe page, so I want to update. And I'll say task repo, save task completed. Okay? And as I do that, if I click set all, it will set them, set all uncompleted, it will. User is happy, I can go home, but I get a call from my boss who says, what have you done? Look at the network. How many requests are you doing? For everyone, sending a put request to the backend, look, like this can be very problematic if we have many tasks. And says, don't worry about it. I can move it to the backend. It's not really problematic. So let's go ahead. Let's move this code to the backend. I'm going to go to our controller. Okay. And class. Great. And then this function, backend code. I'll change it to be async. And I'll demonstrate it using the backend. Tells remult that whenever if you're about to call this code in the front, don't run it in the backend, over there. And just like, but if previously the repository objects that I got backend to get what it wants, SQL calls for Postgres or Mongo, for every specific database. And now let's go ahead and expose that. I'll go to index.ts, controllers, task controller, and a new API route. Okay. And switching to the front-end code, instead of making this set all code, I'll simply say our controller completed or uncompleted. It's just one API. And I think that by being able to have the same interface used in the front end to call and the backend, I have code portability between the front end and the backend. I don't have to switch. It opens a whole new world of possibilities of code or share code between the backend. It's flexible. And also, by using the same type, I actually get type validation. So if for some reason I'll decide to send a string over here, like I often do when I do mistakes, it checks it for me and makes sure that I don't do. Okay, so I get typing validation as well. So we've done setup, we've done entities, paging, CRUD, live query, validation, backend. It's time to grow up and start using a database. Okay, so far we've been using our JSON database. Now we need to deploy somewhere, and JSON is not a database. Postgres. So I'm going to go to my API definition and import from remult Postgres. And I'm just going to say over here, provider is a Postgres data provider with a connection string that I've prepared in advance. Okay? And as soon as I save that, you see I don't have it because there's no data in my database, in this database. And if we open the console and resize it just a little bit so we can see everything that I've done here, we can see, haha, is important. But then we can see we created the table. Okay? Now, by this, we have a flag called ensure schema that is. So it does some variation. Variation loads, it verifies that all entities exist. And if they doesn't exist, it them. And it checks columns existing. If those doesn't exist, column. We find that it strikes a balance between a speed of development and complexity. It's also forward and backward when you're moving between versions because you only nothing is broken. But of course, this complex migration it can take you quite far. Now that we have it here, alternative, post this array in because I don't have the patience to type it all. And the data is added, and because it really updates it, so setup, paging, CRUD, validation, backend databases. So we'll close. But the next important topic is application and authorization. Our users want other users to touch their database. You probably see a lot. So just like anything else, this to be defined in my single, in my focal point of everything in the app. The CRUD operation is allowed for users that are authenticated. Okay? And as soon as I save, I will not see any data because I'm not authenticated. Okay? Is that we got a network error over here. And I'm going to do the same. We don't want someone who's not authenticated to set all tasks. So I'm going to say allow authenticated. So now I'm protecting my other endpoint. Authentication is a problem that we've solved many times, but people who are buying. You can use any kind of authentication. All you need to do is tell remult, does he figure out who is the user, okay? So for the sake of demo, I'm going to switch my head, develop quickly, authentication, a simple one, but know that you can use passport, you can use next auth, you can use your own implementation things. I'm just going to do cookie session 1. Stay here. Please, and let's review it. So, the Then I have a list of users. Of course, in real life, you're going to get it from an external provider via, or you're going to use a database table. For this demo, will do. And I use here without express route, and it would work beautifully. I wanted to show you that remult doesn't hold you, if there's something that you want to do, express routes, do it with regular express. Use it when it provides you value, use whatever you use today, or whatever provides you better value when you get. So the logic here is pretty simple. I'm reading it exists, I'm sending it back as a result, and I'm setting it to my session. If there's an error, I'm sign out, sets the session to null, uses the user from the session. Okay. And in my front end, by saying here, auth component, I've prepared in advance. Let's take a look at the auth component. So it has a sign-in username and the current user. And here there's a sign-in method that, again, I wanted to show you, doesn't have to use remult. You can, of course, use it with remult and backend method, but I wanted to show that you can make normal fetch calls or Axios calls or HTTP client calls, whatever you like, whatever gets the work. Remult plays nice with others. Here I get the user and I set them. Great, and there's a sign-out functionality and all is great. So now I can sign in as Steve, but I still don't get the data, and that's because we never told remult who the user is on the backend. Okay, so let's do that. And tell remult to get the user, it will go to the request and do request session. So did everywhere here in my code. Okay, so I'm getting the from the request. Let's save it, and now data because Steve is authenticated. Great. So the last thing I want to show you is authorization, because there's Steve and Jen decided it's responsible enough to add the tasks. He's just allowed to check them. So let's add that functionality. And just like anything else, I want it to be defined in my source of truth in a declarative manner. So I'll say here that when the API tries to delete, it would require an admin role. And when it tries to insert, it would also require an admin role. And when we try to update the title, it would also require an admin role. Okay, now, all of these are not just strings or keys or whatever. It can be an arrow function, whatever complexities that you need. Strings for a role is just a basic implementation. And over to our list of users and nominate Jane as an admin. So Steve will not be able to do anything. Okay, they can just check, but sign out and sign in as Jane. And can add a responsible task. She can also delete it. But the declarative definition. Now, the last thing I want to do before deployment is talk about consistency. Because we see in many applications, only admins are allowed to delete or insert, but Steve still sees the add and delete buttons. Okay? And so Steve is as a user because he tries to add things and he always gets errors and whatever. User experience not to show them the form or the button at all. Now, normally in a front-end app, I would say, okay, if the user has an admin role, I would duplicate this logic. I don't want to duplicate this logic. So I can actually access the same metadata from my end and use it in my front end. So let's go to our app TS6. I'll highlight my form. And I'll say, if task repo data insert is allowed, only then show the add button. So the form disappeared for Steve. And I can do the same with the delete button, which is over here. Task repo, data, API deleted. and then the delete button would no longer appear. And I can get a consistent user experience that matches my API, and it really responds in real time. So if I just go here and say, well, anyone is allowed, sorry, to the add, I'll get to see the button. If I turn it back to admin, the button would hide. So I think it's quite cool. Okay? So we've done setup, entities, paging, CRUD, live query, backend database, authentication, and authorization. Do you want to see it deployed to the cloud? Okay. So previously I used to deploy to Heroku, which are amazing. I really love them. But for some reason they want to get paid now. And there are other players, Fly.io. I specifically use Railway. So deploy this up to Railway. This works half the time, so bear with me. If it doesn't, we'll switch to Heroku, but I believe it will work. So let's first of all adjust our app to be ready for deployment. So here we took the secret from the process and variable. We also want a connection string from environment variable because Railway will set up the Postgres database and it's not going to have this connection string. It's going to send it to me in an environment variable called a database URL. Okay, so yeah, this is something that is important to get right. So if I have an environment a variable database URL, I will use it. Otherwise, I'll use my hard-coded local connection string. And the next thing I want to do, I don't want to have multiple servers and static whatever. I want this Node.js application to also the static. Okay, so I'm going to replace this simple app listen with these lines of code that actually says this is the front-end files location. When Vite builds the file are in the dist folder, just like CRA, and then serve them. Okay, if you don't find something, serve the index, just routing in the front end and whatever. Okay, so let's go ahead and save this. And I'll open a new terminal window, and I'll start speaking to Railway. Say a Railway init, and I'll choose an project, and I'll say PragueJS. Nice name for the project, Railway opened. And then I will ask Railway to please add a. Now it's adding my Postgres database, which is kind of fun that it's all so simple to set up these days. And then I'll say railway.app. And when I do that, Railway will add my source code. Okay, set up whatever it needs to set up over there. And then it will run npm install to install all the packages, npm build to build my code, and npm start to run my code. And start is simply node dist server backend index.js. Okay. Now this will take like a little bit. You can see it just completed building thing. I'll use the time to tell you a little bit more about what you can do with remult. So remult has a lot more functionalities than what I was able to show in this 25 minutes, I think, of live coding. I think I was in time, hoping. Full support for GraphQL. So we already have the definition of everything, so why not expose GraphQL to it if you want. So these entities and relations can also be accessed through GraphQL. And there's multiple and escape hatches where you can intervene. Like I want to do something when I'm about to save a task or when I'm about to do a task or after it was deleted. You can add also logic, and you've seen that we used the authorization metadata in the front end. We can use all data in the front end, and we can start putting the source of truth. Okay, and once you start working with that mindset, you'll put things there that will affect your UI and affect your application. It just becomes your real for everything that you need. Relationships in entities, fields will be updated on the back end, or fields want to show anyone, or salaries want to show to admin. You can do things. And work without classes for who doesn't like classes, and without decorators for the guy somewhere who doesn't like decorators. And if any point, let us know, because it helps us do it. And of course, we can also use plain.js if you don't like TypeScript or know why. Let's see if we got some headway. Okay, this one's done, great. So I'm going to ask it to settings, please generate a domain for me. and I'll open it. And it takes it usually a minute to load. So let's take this time and take a look at the logs that we get. Like when we do a deployment, Railway actually shows me the logs for it. So I can see what it was doing. And we can see that the same thing that we previously seen in our console was now running in the cloud. So we have the routes, and we have the create table. It creates Postgres table in the cloud. And hopefully it's working by now. And if not, it's a good time for questions. Error. No, I hate errors. Why do you give me errors? No. Yes, it works. OK, perfect. Thank you so much. And now, just released version. I want all you guys to be waiting. So let's do something. Give remult a star. And I will open it. And I'll make it huge. Please take out your and start adding tasks, and it works in real time like it's supposed to. You know, a picture of you guys with your phones. It's so cool. So my wife will believe me that I'm actually doing a meaningful thing here. Yeah, so I'll sign in as Jane, because Jane can. Hey, and you guys are ahead of me. Cool. So the real-time functionality works. Yay. Well, it doesn't suck that bad. It has. OK, cool. So and then we can use it also for questions. So I invite you guys to visit remult.dev. We have tutorials written this weekend, and they do everything done here today with Angular, Vue, and Next. Please enter them, try them, run through, report issues, fix things, contribute things. And this is the QR code because all of you want to open it now and give me a star. Just something. We're currently having 1,700 stars and 7K. If you add more stars, it will show 1 point, and that would be. So do that. This is my this is my email, and this is my personal number. Join our Discord, play with remult, do cool things, and let me know how it goes. Questions? Go ahead.
Heard of Meteor.js?
Yeah, of course.
Remult solves better.
So Meteor exists for a very long time. It's a group of very smart people that have done wonderful things. They've done Meteor and then Apollo OK, Meteor has created their own protocol, and action was kind of incrementally happening behind the scenes. And Meteor, you had to either use or not use it, or use it. It was kind of a vendor locking where you couldn't have an application that is partially Meteor with other things. So I represent better simplicity than what brought of that's at least so. OK, thank you. Next. There are.
Queries for client pooling, because people who mention and only client pooling, so.
Right question. So the beauty about live query is that it's things that exist today. So implementations that you've seen today uses the most basic HTTP protocol called serve send events. OK, so it doesn't use web. Doesn't have the horrible limitations it described. So you can use SSE to just work. But just one more thing. For development, use SSE. We have deployed in my app with hundreds of users. It works on my $7 Heroku server at that scale. So I'm happy for that. But it's a plugin. So it's very easily replaceable. We provide a plugin for industry standard tools to do scale of messaging like Ably or Sub or others. And you can create very easily a plugin to polling, and you'll get it in there. You implement publish and subscribe, and that. OK, so you can very easily create ones that's based on polling and would work for you. But I will give it a try.
One last question before.
Yes, it would be React Native, of course. Anything JavaScript, it would work one. And we've seen application done with even Angular on capacity on a native. So you've really done everything with it. And you have the repository to interact with the backend or with database on the server. It also can interact with your local storage or local WebSQL. And you can use the same code to very easily create offline apps just by querying data, storing it in a local repository, and the same simplicity of code when you do all of that.
Great.
Okay.
It was very cool. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Guys, take like 10 minutes break. There is in the second room. All the downstairs, so please sit down and gonna be around. So if you have more questions, ask him.
Yeah, I'm doing it. My flight is only in the morning, so whatever you. Okay. It's okay to take. Okay, perfect.
Thank you. It was really great.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I'm happy that my voice held. I was sure it was going to break.
It looked so easy, but I can imagine how much work it was to prepare everything.
Yeah. But this is to prepare a Polish presentation. I've done it 100 times, just to not. Thank you.
I like it, and I'll test it myself.
I would love to hear your feedback. I would love it.
It takes a lot of effort to keep it running, such a project. Is there some business case behind it? Like, are you able to?
So I didn't say that it was open source. I forgot to say that it was open source. It's
it
completely
is,
open source.
But you know,
How it's going to survive?
there's no free beer.
So there's several things about it. We hope that it will catch traction, and if it does, we'll figure out how to make it our day job. Okay. So currently, I have a day job, pays for my